Engineer OK, thank you very much for joining us in our In Conversation with series.
Yes.
Could I start by asking you, as it stands at present, around half Nigeria's population doesn't have access to electricity. Why is that?
You're quite right. I would say really is about 55% of the population have access to electricity in Nigeria. Nigeria is a big country. There's a lot of remote areas. So really it's mostly the cities as of today that have it. And extending power to those remote areas is really expensive. If you look at the population vis-a-vis the installation that you need to do. But despite this, the aspiration of the government of Nigeria is that by 2020, 75% of the population, should have access to electricity. And that is the drive, that we're making. In order to achieve that, much of the work will have to move away from the conventional power generation concept that we have at stop today. We are using gas mostly, but looking forward, we would expect to diversify. And for those remote locations, Nigeria is blessed with a lot of sun, everywhere. You don't really need to do too much work about solar. So we expect that going forward, a lot of off-grid facilities will be set up using solar energy. And in some places where the wind is there, though not much in this country, as compared to what we have maybe in the UK or in Copenhagen, where I went sometime, where they have windmills all over the place. But Nigeria, yes, with the utilization of solar, definitely will be able to make a difference to achieve the target, that we have for 2020, which is 75% coverage of the country.
So, Engineer, thank you. And you mentioned there that one of the big targets for 2020 is to increase coverage of the population, the numbers and the percentage who have access to electricity. What impact is it having on Nigeria at the moment, both economically and in human terms, that so many people aren't covered?
Well, the reality is that everybody wants to enjoy the best in life. So you see a lot of migration, of people, from the rural areas into the city. That is, you have plenty of power. Also, employment opportunities, it will be very limited in the remote location. You will have to stay work on the farm, but by coming into the city, there's opportunities for them. And if we begin to supply power, to those remote locations, that difference will begin to happen, where people don't necessarily need to leave their locality. Very much the kind of thing you see in the UK or the US, where the likes of Marks and Spencer's is everywhere, and we're expecting that with that kind of development, the improvement in the quality of life for the people, should begin to happen. There will be transformation. And I also believe that a lot of the insecurity problems that we'll have, will be greatly reduced as a result of that, because like they always say, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, for start doing negative things. And then we'll begin to see people busy, they'll make money in the process. And that way, the quality of life of the people would be greatly improved.
The power reform process, of course, isn't new, and it's been ongoing for a number of years now. And the organisation of which you're the acting chairman, the Presidential Task Force on Power, has been heavily involved in the reforms. Could you just outline what those reforms have looked like from your perspective so far?
Effectively, let me say the reform had three legs to it. The first one being the element of service delivery. The other one is two-legged, and I would say privatization and commercialization. The electricity industry in Nigeria, prior to now, has been fully government funded. And the reality is that government will never have enough resources. That's the fact of life, everywhere. And so it was impossible for the government to meet all its commitments on that. And that has been a major driver. The Electricity Act, was passed in 2005 and really didn't move forward until the Presidential Task Force was set up, that developed the roadmap to move to progress the development of the reform from the Act into reality. And as of today, the privatization has been completely done, 100%. But the commercialization is still in the process of development. Ideally, we should have done the commercialization before we privatize. That's the ideal process. But eventually we ended up privatizing before fully commercializing. As of today, we moved into the transitional electricity market, which, let me say, is still at its infancy, and that is the process to bring about the commercialization. The idea being that in the commercialized market, everybody that invests should be able to make sure that he gets his returns, from the investment process. And in terms of service delivery, we've actually moved from about 2,500 megawatt to, let me say, we hit a peak of 4,517 megawatt. That was in 2012, I believe. Unfortunately, a lot of vandalism came into the system of both transmission infrastructure and gas supply facilities, and let me say crude oil theft, which affected gas supply, and that resulted into a dip in terms of the power supply. Otherwise, I would have said that much of some of the target, in terms of service delivery, is being achieved. Let me say, since for the past 2 months, where the issue of vandalism seemed to have gone down, we're actually back in excess of 4,300 megawatt. And the major gas infrastructure that was blown up is also nearing completion right now. And hopefully within the next 2 weeks, that will be back into service. And our dream to hit a new power and energy peak, I would say, is very close now to reality. And I can see that happen very soon. I wouldn't like to give dates, but I will say it is very close. And this is the drive that we're making. So overall, looking at the reform, I'll say yes, we're on the right path. And we're getting close. One incident that has happened, which I believe has justified the reform, is the drop in oil price. Nigeria has been fully dependent, let me say, over 90% on oil in terms of income. And with the drop in oil price, there's less money for government to spend. And so to me, the privatization has been good, because it means that government would have needed more money now to be able to keep the system going. But it doesn't need to, because now it is in the hand of the private sector that will look for money. But to encourage them to be able to stay there, the issue of the tariff, which is presently under processing, by the distribution companies to make submission back to the regulatory commission, is in progress. And once that is done, I believe that Nigeria will be a wonderful place for investors to come. The population is large, the power supply is small, so the opportunity for growth is very much in there. It's inherent in what we have in this country.
Well, Engineer, you touched upon there some of the reasons why maybe the power reforms haven't necessarily shown through in terms of service delivery yet. Vandalism being one of them, but also some of the reasons why the privatisation path was gone down in the first place, and falling government revenues would be another. There's been a lot of criticism towards the PTFP, towards the former administration, for supporting privatisation, with some people saying that the poorest people will now pay more for their electricity. Do you think that's true, and do you have any regrets about the process?
Let me start with the latter part. I'm extremely happy that we went through the privatization path, because I'm very confident that with reduced government income, the ability to carry out capital projects will be greatly reduced. And so even for that reason, if for no other reason, it's good we went the privatization path. Let me go back to the second element. And I'll use the telecoms industry as an analogy. Now, before the privatization of the telecom industry, to get a line in Nigeria, you need about 120,000 naira. And there's no guarantee that that line will remain. Now, when the privatization started, the SIM card was sold for 30,000 naira. Competition came in. And when the competition came in, it dropped. I was out of the country then. When I came back, I bought my own SIM card for about 10,000 naira. As of today, SIM card is virtually free. And also when the communication privatization started, I know it wasn't easy for the poor people, to be able to get it. But with the establishment and as competition set in, it became so free that right now, I believe, as of that time, the number of people with telephones in Nigeria was very limited. And I think, in fact, people said it was for the rich. But now it's for everybody. I believe more than half of the population of this country, have access to telephone. Even when I go into the rural areas, I see people, with even the cattle areas, they now have telephone. The same vision, I believe, that is going to happen for power. Initially, let me say, it may look difficult for the poor people. And the reality is that in any business, any new venture that you're starting, the reality is that it is not always cheap. There is a lot of investment, which will make it difficult for everybody, to have the benefit. But as time goes on, the benefit will spill over. So initially, I will say that it may be difficult, but effort is being made, And I believe if you also look at the tariff here, there are different categories of tariff. The lowest, what I call like a lifeline tariff, is I think about 4 naira or thereabout, which is very cheap. So hopefully as we go on, what I will say is that if people don't want to pay for electricity, then they should remain at the low level. But I believe that as more power comes in, the tariff also will come down. But if really we don't go through this painful path, we will probably never make it. What I many times say is that, if you look at a lot of people who struggle for survival, the early days is usually tough. But once they overcome, then life is much, much better. And I think we're going through the painful process in Nigeria as of today. And I'm very confident that as we go on, more power will come, more people will be able to have it, they can invest they can have alternative source of income. And then that in itself will help, to bring down, to improve the quality of life. And what they cannot afford before, they'll be able to afford it as a result of the electricity that will be available for them.
And is it true also, talking around the tariff system which you mentioned there, that graded tariffs, so not everybody paying the same price, not the poorest consumer paying the same price as, for instance, a medium-sized business or indeed a sort of a relatively well-off household. That has been something which you've kept core to the reforms which have been going through at the moment?
Yes. Yeah, really, the reality, I think you have like residential, there are different categories. And the more you use, the more you pay. That's the structure, of the tariff. But overall, even though that is the case, the expectation is that as more power comes, the operational cost of the companies would not increase substantially, but there will be more energy to sell. So in which case, overall, we expect to see a decline in tariff as more power becomes available into the grid.
Do you think people, the public in general, but also, I suppose, political Nigerians and those looking on from outside the country, have the right expectation in terms of timelines? Because a lot of what you've spoken about is about investment and about the gradual change as competition comes into a market. Yeah. There are a lot of people now saying, well, the transitional market, for instance, is reaching a point where it's around a year old. But we are not yet seeing the pull-through in terms of electricity supplied. Are those people thinking in terms of the right timelines, or will this be a much more gradual process which we've just embarked on?
Well, to build a power plant, takes 2 to 3 years. And let me say, prior to the establishment of the Presidential Task Force on Power, the coordination along the chain has been very limited. But since the PTFP came into existence, you will be able to look from the fuel all to the market, and we are identifying gaps and closing it. Much of those gaps have been closed. So let me say the foundation, has been laid. And we are very much at the point of beginning to see the benefit, of the reform process. Like I did mention, we've had a situation whereby on the western side, we have power plants, there's no gas. In the east, there is gas, there's no power plant, or maybe there's no means of evacuation. But much of the work that has been done now is that the west, gas is coming. In the east, the transmission bottleneck is being removed. The power plants are being completed. So with this, and between the two sections, we have probably about 3,000 megawatt that is, let me say, stranded either as a result of gas or transmission or power plant. And from the middle of this, let me say from Q3 of this year, it is expected that some of those facilities will begin to be completed. And that means we'll begin to have some jumps. And in the interim, we expect that the likes of Azura, which is closing, which is, let me say, the Star plant, which is the first major investment by a private investor, will begin to get to final investment decision. And so 2 or 3 years down the line, then we expect that the benefit of that will begin to come into place. So let me say, initially, yes, we're closing the gap, and I believe that once the issue of the tariff is sorted out, people will begin to see the benefit of it. And I believe one of the challenges we've had also is the issue of uncertainty of payment. That will begin a thing of the past. And that, I will say, probably within the next 3 to 4 years, the benefit of that will begin to show, to be able to give investors confidence, and hopefully within the next 12 months or thereabout, people will begin to see that, and the trend to begin to invest in Nigeria should begin to start, to give confidence to people that invest, that they'll be able to recover their money.
Now, talking about the future,
yes.
Obviously Nigeria has come out of presidential elections with a new president, President Buhari. Yes. Do you have a feel yet for the direction that he'll want to take within the power sector? Will it be a case of continuing to build on the reforms already in place, or will he want to take a new direction?
My expectation is that they will study what is on the ground, and I'm sure they will not want to reinvent the wheel. And that being the process, I expect that once people begin to see the reality on the ground, and also the inability, to be able to look for, to get money to invest, I believe, to start building separate power plants, fund facilities like in the past, it is my expectation that they would see the benefit of what has been done and build on it. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the foundation has been laid, for us to move forward positively as a nation. And I will believe they'll take advantage of that.
And what would your advice be to the incoming administration? What do you think are the main points that they need to be tackling soon in terms of the power reform process?
I would say the number one item is the market, which is already being working on to study it, because that to me is the answer, to subsequent form of future investment. Secondly, the issue of vandalism, it must be nipped in the bud. And once that is done, we can be sure that the fuel will always get to the power plant. And let me say, associated with that is the crude oil theft that must also be stopped. Because what you see, both on the eastern and the western part of the country, is that the crude oil thieves, attaching their pipes to the main infrastructure to siphon fuel. Ultimately, those facilities need to be removed. And to remove it, you need to shut down the crude facilities. And as you shut down the crude facilities, the gas facilities also need to shut down. So if we handle those two elements as an immediate issue, completing the market to make sure that it works, and that also means that making sure that the distribution companies return money into the kitty so that the upstream of the business can survive, and then tackling the issue of vandalism, that will go a very long way, at not only providing power, but also sustaining it. There is some problems associated with transmission. And there is what we call the north-south loop, like I did mention earlier on, which will release power from the east, the stranded power there. And once that is done, the beauty of the north-south loop also is that when we look at the transmission network in Nigeria, prior to now, it is essentially radial. And with the north-south loop, it begins to close, and we begin to improve the security of the power delivery within the network. And that will begin to make a difference. So I will say making the market work, vandalism, and then the transmission network. Once those ones are dealt with, I believe that the chain will begin to work well. It will begin to be sustainable. And once the sustainability is there, then the reliability, will follow in terms of the number of hours of system interruption that, we've been seeing. Probably one other element, which is being looked at, is the issue of the system, reserve, the spinning reserve within the network, to make sure that when there is disturbances within the network, instead of the whole network collapsing, then the spinning reserves, takes up the slack, and they make sure that the disturbance does not result in a total collapse of the system.
Thank you. We've spoken so far about the investment made by the private sector, the investment made by the government. Of course, there's also a process where international donors have made an investment too. Can I ask you what support you've received from the donor community towards the power reform process, and do you perceive that to have been a good investment when it comes to the international donor community?
Let me say, the greatest support we received is from NAV defeat, especially, both to the ministry as well as the presidential task force on power. Without it really, the quality of people that we have within the presidential task force, we would not have been able to retain them. These are professionals, several of them fellows of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. They worked, even though some are retirees, but the quality and the experience that they have, would not have been able to retain them. So really, without that, and the government would normally not be able to sustain such kind of people within the setup. So it's been a wonderful thing. And like I said, without it, much of what we have achieved, would not have been done. There's also the issue of interaction. with the NAV team, the World Bank, the USAID team. That has been very helpful because they've kept us straight in that they ask a lot of what I call difficult questions. But because of the professionalism available within the PTRP, the interaction has been good and of mutual benefit. I say this because, when people go around looking for information, by the time they come to the PTRP, they more or less get to the end of the road, because virtually everything that they need, they get there. And there is the issue of honesty and transparency, that you also see there. So without the donors, really, we will really not have achieved much. At least to be able, the biggest element being the ability to be able to retain high quality staff, to be able to run the organization.
And I think a lot of donors are looking at their programs, particularly within the power sector, and thinking now, how can we best support for the next 5 years following the presidential election? Are there any areas where you think donor engagement, donor support is going to be particularly important to Nigeria in the coming years ahead?
Well, first of all, I will say retaining the PTRP and the quality of staff and supporting them. That to me is very key. Secondly, there are studies that needs to be done. I know, one thing I've mentioned several times is the low demand study. And I'm made to understand that there are some donors that are looking at that. So that is very important, for us to design the network and make sure that the issue of the demand is met, in line with, the infrastructure that we're building is tailored to meeting demand. And also it will enable us to optimize the use of any fund that we have. In transmission, the capacity is limited. There will be money, there will be need for money, to fund the investment. And that is still in government hands. So it's something that would be required. Then the issue of, capacity development, generally across the board. One of the shortfalls of the industry is that after a while, they stopped employing people. And so there's been a gap. So there's been no succession plan. So the generation has gone, no new generation to take over. So capacity development, even the likes of NAPTIN, working with the donors is an area that I believe there could be opportunities for development. And I know, I don't know how much money the donors have, but I'm sure, as new power plants begin to come up, they may require some funding and financing. And this is an area also that we would need assistance. But I will say that the market will be right. And once the market is right, the fear of even people recovering investment, should begin to be a thing of the past.
Thank you. Engineer Oke, it's been fascinating talking to you today, and I wonder whether we could just leave this this interview with a single thought from your side to the man on the street who at the moment is waiting for his electricity supply to improve, who is interested in how the power reforms are going. Can I just ask you what you would say to him if you had the opportunity just to reach out and say a couple of words?
Well, I'll say one of the best decisions that Nigeria has taken of recent is to go to carry out the reform. Because, and the foundation, for its realization has been laid. The fruit is beginning to yield. And so I will say that they need to be patient, and it is not an indefinite patience, because the future is brighter than the past. We have gone through the war situation, and they should recognize that government is also doing something on the issue of vandalism, which has been the major threat. The transmission network investment has been made. Some of the major ones will begin to yield fruit very soon. And I believe, all things going well, another 6 months from now, they should begin to see some of the benefit. But I'll appeal to them that on their own part, they should make sure that they pay for the electricity that they use. That is the minimum contribution that they can make. In this country, when you leak secret, they call you an amebo. It will be beneficial for Nigerians to be amebo in this instance. If you see somebody, that's a whistleblower. If you see somebody that is doing something wrong, please shout, because it will help all of us to be able to reduce and get rid of people that are destructive to the system. That is the message, that I have for my fellow citizens and investors. But they should take note that everything is being done to deal with issues which were bottlenecks, and let me say problems to the survival of the industry. Those issues are being tackled, and they should be ready to come and spend their money here, because they will enjoy the benefit of it.
Engineer Oke, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been fascinating talking to you, and we're very grateful.
Well, thank you very much.